How did they make one almost as weird as the last one? Hey everyone, Sumo Spiffy here. The Banzuke is officially out for Kyushu, November 2024. It is time to break it down, the good, the bad, and the exceedingly funky. Let's get right into it. Starting at the top as always, Takanosho, our reigning Yokozuna, followed up by Kotozakura and Hoshoryu. Both had 8 wins in September, so they're going to stay in the same order relative to each other. Onosato, the new Ozeki, comes in at Ozeki 2 West, as expected. Kirishima, Sekiwake 1 East, as the only incumbent Sekiwake, I should say. Daisho promoted on 8 and 7 from Komusubi 1 East. And Wakamoto Haru, the number 1 contender to take the Komusubi slot. He goes to Komusubi 1 East. After that, we have something that we referred to as a 50-50 repeatedly. In the instant Banzuke, we had Shodai taking the Komusubi slot, swapped it to Oho for guess the Banzuke purposes. That ended up being wrong. Shodai was correct. This was always kind of a coin flip. It's okay. Either one would have been fine. There was a good argument for either one. A lot of people had Wakataka Kage taking that last spot, and that never really seemed all that plausible to me. I mean, I understand why they thought he would get it, because there was an opening, and by math, he was the best option. He's a proven Sanyaku level wrestler. It would have been quite surprising, but there was always like a non-zero chance of that happening. But didn't happen. Shodai gets it. Oho goes to M1 East. Speaking of Wakataka Kage, he does go to Maegashira 2 East, as we expected, although a lot of people had him, again, at Komusubi or at Maegashira 1 somewhere. Hiradoumi ends up at Maegashira 1 West. He gets the 1 rank drop from Komusubi on 7 and 8. Perfectly reasonable. We move on. Ura, Maegashira 2 West. He goes up from Maegashira 5 East on 9 and 6. This was really the only option for that spot. So far, so good. Abi and Atami Fuji. Now, initially, I thought the question was going to be between Abi and Chura Naomi. I had Chura initially, then I switched it to Abi because I was like, well, Abi, he's coming down from the Sanyaku. This seems like a good opportunity for them to show that little bit of Sanyaku preference, and they did. But I certainly didn't expect them to push him ahead of Atami Fuji, especially since that meant over-demoting Atami Fuji on 7 and 8. He goes down a rank and a half. Why they did that, I'm not really sure. I don't have a good guess for this. Obviously, Abi being in the Sanyaku meant something. I don't know if there was like a certain level of disappointment with Atami Fuji that he's been struggling when so much is expected of him, or if they were just like, you know what, these 7 and 8 guys, we're just going to start pushing them down a little bit more. And the rest of the Banzuke gives us a lot of reason to think that that latter idea is the case, but we'll get to those ideas momentarily. In any case, Abi is at 3 East, Atami Fuji at 3 West. Chura Naomi, pretty expected 4 East. He goes up 3.5 ranks on 10 and 5. Oshoma gets his full +5 on 10 and 5. He goes to 4 West. And that's where the wheels come off the fucking train. Now, I try to talk about how the math works when we put the Banzuke together in a decent number of videos. I don't do it every time because then I'd be talking about it all the time and regular viewers would probably get tired of hearing it. But there's frequently people in the comments asking to some degree how this works. I'm not going to go through the whole thing right now, but I do want to point out a little bit of a shorthand that you can use if you want to compare two guys. Let's say we've got a guy who's 7 and 8. I mean, we have Kotoshoho, right? So he's 7 and 8. We treat that as -1 because 7 minus 8 is -1, right? Endo was 8 and 7. So we treat that as +1 because 8 minus 7 is +1. The shorthand is every win is worth 2 ranks, one direction or the other. Every win is worth 2 ranks. So when we look at a situation like Toby Zaru and Kotoshoho, we look over on the left here. So Toby Zaru was Maegashira 1 West. Kotoshoho was Maegashira 4 West, right? Well, Toby Zaru had 5 wins and Kotoshoho had 7 wins. So Kotoshoho started out 3 ranks below Toby Zaru, but 7 versus 5 means he's going to finish mathematically 4 ranks above him. That means he should, when the math is all done, be a full rank ahead of Toby Zaru. Now, Toby Zaru was in the JOI, Oh god, why did I say it like that? That's just how you spell it. Don't get weird. He was in the Joy, the top 16 wrestlers, which means in a lot of cases he'll get a little bit of preferential treatment. Lately, they've been doing that a little bit for guys in that upper echelon because their schedules are harder than those of the guys below. Now, Kota Shoho's wasn't easy. He still had to fight half the Sanyaku, but he's technically outside that top 16, outside the Joy. Still, what that would usually give Tobizaru in terms of advantage is if they were tied for math. So if Tobizaru was rank 1 and Kota Shoho was rank 5, so there was a 4 rank difference, but then Kota Shoho still had that +4, then they'd be tied, and we give it to Tobizaru because he was higher ranked, he had that harder schedule. If Tobizaru was a half rank behind mathematically, sometimes they'll give him that bump as well. But a full rank, that's pretty unusual. But in this case, they ended up giving it to Tobizaru. They pushed Tobizaru up from a full rank behind Kota Shoho mathematically to give him that little bump to 5 East and leave Kota Shoho at 5 West. This gives Kota Shoho a full rank demotion on 7 and 8. Is that the whole reason why they did it? Well, let's move on with the Banzuke before we really finalize our ideas there, but it's probably played into it. It probably played into it to some degree because there have been a number of instances in the recent past where they bumped a 7 and 8 down further than expected that gave them a full rank demotion. Like a half rank isn't good enough, you need to go down the full rank. And given that they bumped a Tommy Fuji down an extra half rank, so a rank and a half on 7 and 8, this becomes a little bit less surprising. In a vacuum, this is a very, very surprising choice. But with the context of what else has happened so far, it's a little bit less surprising. But let's go on from there. So now let's talk about Takanosho. And I'm just gonna give you a little peek behind the scenes. I just recorded a whole ass rant about why this Takanosho move up to Maegashira 6 East is completely mind-blowing. And then I started going through why they did it and some comparisons. And then I realized there's actually a logic to this. And at least one person did predict this correctly. And I was completely astonished. Now, Matakayumi, again, we'll get to him. That one I understood a lot better. But in this case, I did not see this coming. I don't know if almost anyone saw this coming, again, except that one guy, maybe a handful of others. But it looks like the way they treated Wakataka Kage going into September wasn't just something about Wakataka Kage. It seemed like it, like he's coming back, you know, maybe they're doing something a little different with him for some reason. They've done that kind of thing before. And yet they ended up doing essentially the same thing with Nishikigi and by default, Endo. So let's go through this real quick. I'm actually going to drag the Nagoya Banzuke over so we can look at this. Wakataka Kage, he was 11 and 4 at Maegashira 14. Now, this column and this column are where the guys ended up in September. He went up to, Waka went up to Maegashira 7 East, so that was +7. That was exactly 7 ranks, and this was surprising because there were a couple of guys that looked like he should have ended up ahead of, but he didn't. They happened to be in the Joy. We're talking about Meisei, who was 4 and 11 at Maegashira 1, and Gonoyama, who was 5 and 10 at Maegashira 3 West. So how does what happened with Waka actually end up relating directly to what happened this time? Well, if we take our +2 shorthand from before, Waka was Maegashira 14 East and Meisei was Maegashira 1 East. So 14 minus 1 equals 13. Waka had 11 wins, Meisei had 4. 7 wins times 2 ranks per win equals 14. So mathematically, Waka should have ended up 1 rank ahead of Meisei. All right. Gonoyama was 5 and 10. He was Maegashira 3 West. Well, if 14 minus 3 equals 11, that if they had both been on the East, in this case, it ends up being a difference of 10.5. Waka had 11 wins and Gonoyama had 5, difference of 6. 6 times 2 ranks per equals 12. 12 minus 10.5 equals 1.5. So Waka was a rank and a half mathematically ahead of Gonoyama and yet ended up behind him. Well, what happened this time? Bringing up the math here, we've got Takanosho, who's at, -7 on the math, 4 and 11 for Maegashira 1 East. Nishikigi is only a half rank ahead of where Wakataka Kage was, which means he is 1.5 ranks ahead of Takanosho in this case. And then Endo is himself a full rank ahead of Takanosho. Where it looked like Wakataka Kage was being treated differently for Waka reasons, in fact, Nishikigi, coming up from about the same point, got treated the exact same way. He was limited to exactly the mathematical promotion that he was allowed. That created a gap at Maegashira 6 East, and Takanosho was allowed to fill it. Probably because he was in the Joy. If there was a guy who was 6 and 9 at Maegashira 5 East and not 4 and 11 at Maegashira 1 East, I don't think this happens. This is the Joy preference coming into play. Takanosho, being at that higher rank, was given the chance to fill this open slot so that they didn't have to put Nishikigi further up than he quote-unquote deserved to go. Why they've decided to do this now, I don't know. The only thing I can think is that they're like, well, you know, we started over-promoting guys a lot, and then they'd get further up, and then they'd be disappointing. But Takanosho just did the same thing. He was Maegashira 6, totally kicked ass, almost won the friggin' title, then goes to Maegashira 1 and gets his ass beat. Like, this is everybody. Why? What is with this enormous change over the last 6 months or so? I don't understand that part. But with respect to what happened this time, there is actually now a 2-tournament precedent, because this is the kind of thing, maybe they did it way back in the day, I don't know, but recently, this is not something they ever did. But they did it to Waka last time, and now they're doing it to Nishikigi, and again, by extension, Endo, this time. Given the extent of recent changes, that doesn't mean that if something similar happens this time, they'll do it again in January, but it definitely means that it's worth thinking about. The math is taking a back seat to trying to limit these guys from way low down who do really well from accelerating too far up the ranks. Again, I don't know why they're doing it this way, but that does seem to be the current modus operandi. Take into consideration when you're making your predictions, at least for the near future, until we see if this is a definite thing that they're doing or if they just decide to change it up again. Back to the Banzuke itself, Mitakeumi's in red because technically I was off by 2 numbers. I had him at 9 East and he went to 7 West, but this is actually a less weird situation. As we can see, Mitakeumi mathematically was at Maegashira 10 East, and the 3 guys he ended up ahead of, somewhat surprisingly, at least to me, were Gonoyama, Midori Fuji, and Roga, who were all at 9 West. So he was only a half rank behind all of them. If you figure they're going to push Takanosho ahead of Nishikigi and Endo, then predicting Mitakeumi is going to go ahead of those 3 guys actually becomes pretty straightforward and easy. Now, I didn't predict either one, so it kind of blew my whole thing. But in retrospect, like now that we're looking at the Banzuke, it actually makes sense. It is consistent all the way through. I'll give them this. At the very least, the decisions they made this time, as surprising as they might have been, were consistent from top to bottom. They didn't do anything completely out of bounds, like you did this for these 3 guys, but then you did something totally different for this guy over here. Why'd you do that? No, they were pretty consistent this time, top to bottom. So in terms of predictions, we had Roga, Gonoyama, and Midori Fuji in the correct order. We just had them ahead of Mitakeumi rather than behind him. And then from there, everything just kind of straightens out. Once you get the Joy guys settled and in place, everything just holds to the expected form. We've got Takayasu, he's ahead of Ichi Yamamoto, and then Takara Fuji ended up where you're supposed to go. Same with Tamawashi, same with Meisei. The rethink about Hokuto Fuji and Sada no Umi, because they were tied. Well, yeah, if they're going to keep bumping down these dudes on 7 and 8, because they did a Tommy like that, they did Koto Shoho like that, with those ideas in mind, and I didn't even expect those in the first place, definitely they had to do that to Sada no Umi. Again, they were pretty consistent all the way through. So Hokuto Fuji goes to 12 East, Sada no Umi to 12 West. Ryuden, by the way, I apologize because I goofed up on Guess the Banzuke. Shonen no Umi, I did the math like he was 4 and 11, which put him ahead of Ryuden, but he was 3 and 12, which meant he should have been behind. A couple people called me out. I appreciate them for doing that. That was my bad. Then we've got Chiyoshima, and then all of a sudden things get a little weird again. So Chiyoshima did fill in the slot at 14 East, as expected, but Nishiki Fuji, now this one, this had nothing to do with the Joy. This was just, hey, if you're 7 and 8, you got to go down. They don't do that every time. They haven't done that every time, even very, very recently. And there was not a great reason to push Onokatsu down in this case. Like, Nishiki Fuji barely hung on to a winning record after he luck boxed his way into staying in the division at all. Why they would feel compelled to put him ahead of Onokatsu, I don't know, except he's the one who just happened to get lucky, as Onokatsu was forced down because they thought that that was necessary. Nishiki Fuji, as you can see over here, he's got his +2 because mathematically he was 16 East, and Onokatsu mathematically was at 15 West. So Onokatsu was a half rank ahead, which isn't much, but when you're down this low, they tend to just stick to the way things are ordered. If a guy stays in place on 7 and 8, hey, whatever, that's fine. They're really trying to make a point to guys this time, and this is part of why I'm not sure this kind of thing is going to remain a trend like forever and ever, or at least for quite a while going forward. But I also wonder if, in light of what happened with Nishiki Fuji and Hokuto Fuji with not moving them on 6 and 9 last time, if this is them trying to kind of make up for that. If they caught a lot of blowback for those decisions in September, then they might be here being like, no, the 7 and 8s have to go down. They got to go down now. We got to show that we're willing to demote guys with these losing records if there's any way we can even theoretically do it. But that doesn't mean they're going to do it forever. That's, if you think of it in terms of referees in sports, you know, if they blow a call in one direction, then maybe they make a makeup call in the other direction for the other team, right? Well, in this case, it's like that except with the fans. The JSA, like, they catch a lot of shit from the fans and the media where, how did you do this? Why did you do this? That makes no sense. That's completely unfair. And so this is like their makeup call. So we got to see what happens in January if they do something similar to this, or if they take it back, treat these 7 and 8 guys like they usually do with the same normal demotions and leave them more or less where we would expect them to end up. After that, Toki Hayate, Shishi, and I told you Takeru Fuji was going to go to 16 West. I was on that. I got that one. Yeah. I didn't get Asakoryu. Obviously, that change was completely wrong, but whatever. After the Guess the Banzuke deadline, I was like, no, Kinbozan actually doesn't seem right. That was a dumb choice. And I ended up being correct, although I still would have got him in the wrong order. I would have put Asakoryu at the bottom. But still, he made it up. Congratulations to him. Let's see if he can accomplish anything. Not expecting a lot, just because the reason he spun his wheels in Juryo for a while was that he was just not physically able to win enough matches. Like, he is really small, and that did cause him some problems. And that's not going to get better now that he's in Makuuchi. Best of luck to him. I hope he can stick around, but this might be tough. And that's the Banzuke breakdown. Looked pretty crazy at first. Might be crazy to you if you don't like the reasons for why they made these decisions, but at the very least we can see the reasons for why these decisions were made. There is a logic at work here. We can't say that every single time, so that's kind of nice. I don't know that I agree with it. I do think that, hey, give Nishikigi that 6 East. Leave Toby Zaru at 5 West. Like, you don't, these 7 and 8 guys, if they don't deserve to get bumped down any further, like, don't move them. I think that is a goofy decision, but like I said, that could just be a sort of makeup call because of the 6 and 9 fiasco, and these guys just took it in the pants this time. I'm sure y'all got some opinions, so leave them in the comments. Other than that, you know the tier list is coming. A Tommy Fuji breakdown is being worked on as we speak. Not as we speak, I'm recording, but you know, when I'm done with this. Other than that, have a great day, and I will see you soon.